Sorry about this. There we go. Sorry. Don't know why it seems like it's voice activated or something when I don't have it set up that way, but whatever. Uh, and also, pardon any kind of uh, rough noises. I got my window cracked. It's kind of hot in here. But yeah, welcome back, everybody. I am Carl with another TV show spoiler review. I'm just covering season 3 of the 90s animated Spider-Man series. And this chapter is perfectly titled Sins of the Father. There's a lot of father uh uh father child dynamics going on throughout this entire season. I argue it's probably one of my favorite seasons so far. uh well, I've seen this since I was a kid, and it's been like a long time since I came back to it, but it's still, like I said, a lot of these episodes still hold up, and it's kind of, I understand, but it's kind of crazy it doesn't reach to the same heights as Batman the Animated Series, because there's a lot of stuff you can really dive into in each episode. Uh, we pick up where we left off, where Mary Jane is going to meet her father, because if you know from the comics, Mary Jane and her father typically have like a very strained relationship. He was like pretty much like a deadbeat in most cases, just like an absentee father. And here she's trying to hopefully reconnect with him, but it turns out to be a subterfuge by Baron Mordo, who is under the guise of this cult, in the guise of this organization that helps people reconnect with lost loved ones. And he, of course, is magically manipulating them into breaking into Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum to steal the wand of Watum. And of course, because you can't help, if you rewatching this, especially after something like Spider-Man No Way Home, you just get like the jollies out of this, because honestly, you're seeing like this Doctor Strange, and you can't help but think about like him just trying to break magic just to keep his identity a secret. It's just like, this is a whole lot of fun. But anyway, it's like comes full circle. But anyway, the one person I probably cannot stand out in the entire series, at least the one person that isn't like a villain of some sort, you got Mary Jane's Aunt Anna, who constantly just bashes the hell out of Peter. Like, oh, he's just not here all the time. His poor dear old Aunt May. It's like, shut the fuck up. And it's like, you constantly disrespecting this guy. You don't know what the hell he's got going on. You just assuming. And of course, you can't, narratively, you can't because you can't fault her point of view. For all she is concerned, the guy isn't there when he needs to be for his aunt. But it's like, you making, like, you protest too much, ma'am. But so she really lays into Peter after Mary Jane goes missing. And I'm thinking like, okay, she did not, because Peter had no clue that Mary Jane just kept this meeting her father a secret from her aunt. But I guess like her aunt should know that her father just upped and left. And I guess in this iteration, Mary Jane doesn't know the severity of him leaving. Because thanks to Doctor Strange, she comes to realize how bad of a person he was, and because she kind of suppressed her childhood memories of were like crap father, what a crap father he was. It's never explained what's going on with the mom, but all intents and purposes, she just lives with her aunt. But anyway, so she is brainwashed with a bunch of other people and to try to break into Doctor Strange's house, stealing the Wanda tomb. And Spider-Man trying to get her back, he is also end up brainwashed by Baron Mordo because he is not, because like Batman, Spider-Man really doesn't like toying with things like magic because he's like a scientist. He likes to deal with something tangible, but everything's topsy turvy when it comes to magic, and it's not his like forte. Thanks to Doctor Strange, he lifts the mind control, and they break into this sanctuary, and because Barrymore is trying to use the Wanda tomb to release his master Dormammu. And thanks to Wong, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man, they managed to stop the process. And of course, this is being a kid's show, they can't have like, legit, you have like Wolverine with claws. They have some, like the Punisher with blasters instead of someone with the police. They can't have guns with actual bullets, but you can have laser guns that can do, if not more damage than an actual bullet. But then because of Wong, you got energy blades instead of just actual swords, and it's like, yeah, you can't have them just have just swords. But you can let Wolverine have his claws. But just as a kid show, you gotta make sure they can't have like too much of the like lethal stuff. And also they keep playing back. I'm not sure if they had to work on a particular budget, but you would think after the first season, the show got popular. It had 5 seasons. Of course, it got popular. So you would think after the first season, they will have more of a budget where they don't have to keep reusing certain shots they already have done. Like there's like a moment where after Peter walks in with this new age, guy, like trying to show him around, and he showed him to his room. Then he sneaks off to find Mary Jane and try to sneak her out of her room. And then as he's looking around to see if anybody's seen walking by, they used the same shot of Peter and that guy walking in as he was trying to show Peter around. So it's like, it doesn't take me out of it, but because of course I probably haven't really noticed that much when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure I know stuff here and there, but it really didn't like ruin my enjoyment. But it's like as I got older, it's like it's kind of prevalent. Like, wow, they notice like, okay, they probably did not have the budget to use a different shot or a different drawing. Something behind the scenes was probably like a error. It'd be great to have like because I watched this on Disney Plus. It'd be great to have like certain like behind the scenes kind of stuff for certain shows to see, because I'm pretty sure there's a DVD box collection of this somewhere, and you'll have that kind of thing where they explain like why they had to reuse certain shots. I'm pretty sure there's a good explanation, more than likely the budget. Anyway, they stop Baron Mordo's plan, and just to, because he is a doctor, he used his magic to project him and Mary Jane inside her mind to actually show her the repressed memories of who her father really is as a person that she kind of repressed. And you show him how much of a deadbeat he is. And ironically, because of course it's kind of like therapy in a way, it's like you got to face who your father really was as a person, and not this kind of fantasy you whipped up in your head just to make yourself feel better. And is very therapeutic for Mary Jane. And of course, Dormammu trying to like use, drags her into the mirror dimension, the dark dimension, trying to manipulate her, pretend to be her father, to use her as like a bridge to get into, or an anchor to get into the real world. And of course, Spider-Man, there's nothing he can do about it. And Doctor Strange saying like, trust Mary Jane. Now that her fantasy has been lifted, she can see through all the BS. So she rejects Dormammu and escapes from the dark dimension. And Spider-Man takes Mary Jane home, establishes like a good relationship between him and Doctor Strange and Wong. But then, nice little end of the this little part of the chapter where Doctor Strange just like took notice, like, there's somebody watching us. And Wong is like, what are you talking about? There's somebody watching us right now whose power literally almost dwarfs my own. And you see Madam Web watching from her plane of existence. And it's a nice little moment because, Madam Web acts usually like a guide to Spider-Man a lot. And, if you watch my video game walkthrough of Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, she became like a guide in that game. But she plays like a pivotal role in the last few this season, the last 2 seasons of the series. In the current comics, you got one of the Spider Women, I forget which, not Jessica Drew. This is another one that became the new Madam Web. But typically, Madam Web back in the day used to be like this older woman. Here in the series, she's voiced by Stan Lee's wife, at the time, before it was like, I think she passed away sometime after the series had ended. And matter of fact, it wasn't too long ago that we comic fans celebrated Stan Lee's 100th. He would have been 100 years old exactly, some time ago. But anyway, next we like moved on to the it was I guess you can call it like a filler, but it's kind of like an awesome filler where this little girl's parents sent this fan letter to the Daily Bugle for Peter Parker to hand deliver to Spider-Man. And of course, Spider-Man is kind of like because it's kind of typical right now, around this time where Spider-Man is like, I'm done being Spider-Man, but I'm forced being back to Spider-Man. It's back and forth, because things get tough for him. And it's typical for a Spider-Man thing, but not so much in the recent years, because, the whole Spider-Man No More thing kind of like was been like, milked to death at this point. But around 90s, early 2000s, it was like a kind of like a thing with a back and forth with it. But anyway, he is kind of encouraged, or I would say pushed to go see this child by Madam Web. And I guess because Madam Web tends to be very cryptic and pushy when it comes to trying to guide Spider-Man. And he goes to see this kid, and she showed, because she's also a Spider-Man fan, she got all this like Spider-Man memorabilia all over her room, and she showed him this shoebox full, well, not shoebox, it was like a collage, like usually people have like stamp collections, or like kind of, it was like a photographic book or whatever. It's like a big book with all these like newspaper clippings and everything like that of Spider-Man's adventures. Even like one of the first photographs taken, when, if you know Spider-Man's origins, when he got his powers, he went to like entertainment, try to wrestle for money, use his power to gain some money, and he regales uh uh what was the girl's name? Tina, I think. Tiana. And he regales her about his origin story. And, unlike most other tales when it comes to Spider-Man's origins, this went slightly into body horror kind of shit. Because, like, this is probably where, like, the whole, like, because I do not like spiders and kind of put that fear into me. Where it's like, once he got bit by the radioactive spider, he got sick. He went out to get some air, and like he started hallucinating himself, turned into a spider, and and turned to like a big human head on top of a spider body, rampaging through the city. It was all in his head. But then, of course, he wakes up with superhuman abilities. And of course, he also had to deal with Doc Ock, and he ends up losing his memory thanks to Doc Ock's machine. And Doc Ock took advantage, using him as like a partner in crime. And thanks to Tiana and this, I don't know sure the person who voiced this cabbie is actually Jamaican, but they really lay on that Jamaican accent very thick. Like, it's like, I'm not even going to attempt it because I'm just going to butcher it. I just don't even know what a good line to even use for the Jamaican accent, but it was like really thick. So, because she like got helped by Spider-Man, so she helping this girl track Spider-Man down, and thanks to Tiana, who kind of helped Spider-Man regain his memories and stop Doc Ock. So Tiana, it was kind of like the best time of her life. She went on an adventure and helped Spider-Man, made her day, and probably made her life. And she asked for like at least one request, and she wants to see who he really is. And Peter figured out, okay, as a kid, I'm going to trust her, and she did save my life and ultimately my reputation. So he shows her that he's Peter Parker, and she promises, I'll keep your secret for the rest of my life. And he thanks her, and this kind of gives like Spider-Man kind of like a renewed vigor that he thinks the world's against him, but there are people out there who really do look up to him, that don't believe all that mess Jameson spills on the news and everything like that. And people like the cabbie who appreciate Spider-Man because it's the little people. It's like, that kind of adds up. And just because you don't see their appreciation doesn't mean they're there. And Spider-Man leaves, the last shot of the episode, and it's kind of like a somber thing because I don't think I picked up on it as a kid. But it has, the building that Tiana is staying in, you think is like, an apartment or something. It's actually a home for the terminally ill children. And this is the last time we ever see Tiana. But who knows? It's left obviously ambiguous whether or not Tiana survived because she probably had cancer. It's left ambiguous whether or not she is left alive or she passed away. And Spider-Man obviously doesn't know, but it's kind of like a bittersweet, But I kind of like this little episode. It's kind of should have been condensed into one episode, personally, in my opinion. You don't really need that Doc Ock part of this. You could just have Spider-Man hanging out with this girl, and I don't know. Maybe it's because the added stuff with the cabbie and everything like that shows that there are more people out there who appreciate Spider-Man, and he needed, and I guess Matt Webb's help. He needed that kind of renewed vigor of why he does this. And I'm not sure if the voice actress is, because it'd be kind of interesting if the voice actress involved was an actually, because it is like probably like a kid voicing this, but if the kid actually was like a Make a Wish kind of thing and want to be part of the episode, and they made this specially for her. It'd be kind of cool if that was the case. It's not really shown or told, but it'd be kind of cool. And you got another one-off episode with Rocket Racer. This black kid who is a bit of a scientist himself, and stole some parts from these group of thieves using gyroscopes and rocket propelled stuff in this giant big wheel, spiked big wheel, to go and rob banks and stuff like that. And Rocket Racer what's his real name? I'm blanking on it. Robert Farrell. He uses like a rocket propelled a skateboard to he's kind of like a hero. He first like starting off like, oh, because it's the 90s, the black kid. It's pretty much like proto Miles Morales. It's the Miles Morales before we actually get Miles Morales to test out Spider-Man's kind of like mentorship kind of thing. After that is then like Prowler and stuff like that, but that's neither here nor there. Rocket Racer, he's a kid, because this season you deal with like a fair bit of like, black, underprivileged, people that Spider-Man, being a white man, would not understand. They don't lay it on too thick, thankfully, because I think they might turn some people off. But he's also trying to like do something for kids, teaching little kids about how certain people have certain disadvantages despite their aptitude to like things like science and art and other things, and how like sometimes society kind of doesn't give them the start that they need. And he trying to take care of his mom, and they once again they kind of lay on thick with the whole sassy black woman kind of tone of voice. I don't blame the voice actress. It's probably like what was called for. But it ain't as thick as Jamaican accent from that cabbie. But it's like that woo child, that kind of attitude, and it's like like I know it was in the 90s. Give it like some grace, but I mean, like if they will play it right now, you would say like, okay, tone it back some. This ain't a Tyler Perry movie, okay? Tone it back some. And of course, just like Aunt May, she's like, oh, you're not well, ma. Oh, it's like that kind of thing. It's like, lady, you're easily in like 40, 45. Calm down. You're not Aunt May age, okay? Who knows? He's probably had high blood pressure or something or other. Who knows? And they get hassled by, ironically, the same group of punks who works for the leader of this like rocket gang. And of course, Felicia Hardy is part of this organization that helps, underprivileged children get into science, with Peter being one of the volunteer teachers to help teach these kids about different areas of science. And Rocket Racer, it's like, okay, I can't be a part of this. I got my mom to worry about, and he's considering like because he is assumed to be, because of the color of his skin, he assumed to be like a thief or a thug, and it's like, well, if they think of me this way, I might as well be this way. That warped way of thinking that some kids have. But with with Felicia, his mom, and Peter encouraging him, like, no, that's not the way to go with things. You use your brilliance, your science to get you out of this kind of life. That is, and I'm kind of glad they went into science because it'd be so easy in some other stuff back then to go like, oh, you can be an entertainer or a sports athlete. No, he's a scientist. Use your brains to get out, situations. So, because the criminals now find out from the news that this kid took some of their tools, and if he gets caught, he'll have to tell where he got the stuff from. So they go after him. Thanks to the team with Spider-Man and Rocket Racer, they took those guys down. And then of course, like Felicia Hardy's starting to get feelings for Spider-Man, and it's all through this season. She, Spider-Man is, torn between his feelings for Mary Jane as Peter Parker and Spider-Man's feelings for Felicia Hardy. And you see that kind of, really come to the head in the latter seasons. Next, we got a 2-part episode where we get an introduction of Daredevil. And of course, once again, No Way Home, full circle. Because in the comics, Spider-Man and Daredevil has often been pals. A while back, these two knew each other's identities. But yeah, there's this thing where, ironically, with both of them, with Daredevil, with like the Purple Man's children wiping people's memory of who Daredevil is, thanks to the whole situation with Kingpin, I think, with Born Again. I could be wrong. There's something or other. And at the same time with like Spider-Man and his deal with Mephisto to, protect, because after Civil War and everybody knew his identity, trying to keep that in the wraps again, which kind of placate to some of the stuff that went on in No Way Home. Rather than Mephisto, you got Doctor Strange doing it. And so neither one knows their identity anymore. And I think a lot of people want that kind of dynamic back. But Spider-Man, who took a job with Wilson Fisk, who wants to show his appreciation after, last season when he saved his life from the attack from Hobgoblin, he just working in this kind of data stores, taking some files that's on the disk and, downloaded it. And he does very simple stuff. At least simple for him as a scientist. But then he gets framed and taken in by the FBI, who assumed because of certain, because you get this introduction of Fisk and his own son and another father-son dynamic, because what the son has been doing, obviously leaking information to like enemies of the state. They put it on Parker as a scapegoat. So now, like unbeknownst to anybody else, J. Jonah Jameson hires Matt Murdock to represent Peter Parker, because everybody knows, and the supporting cast. Most of the supporting cast of Peter Parker knows he's not a traitor to his country, and it's all a bunch of baloney, even including like Detective Lee, who has run in with Parker every once in a while, ever since the episode with Mysterio. She knows like Parker, like there's more to it than just because Parker wouldn't be like a traitor to his country. That's not him. And of course, you got this other woman who turns out to be working for Wilson Fisk, because if you watch the Daredevil series, he has his hands on a lot of people's pocket, or at least has some people in like certain police departments working for him. It's like kingpin of crime. And thanks to Matt Murdock and Daredevil, I should say, who saves Peter Parker from being like supposedly taken by uh, Chameleon, who's working for Wilson Fisk, and hiding out in Matt Murdock's apartment. And he regales Peter of the story of how he became blind. And of course, he doesn't tell him about his superhero identity. And of course, you know the story. He was if you watch the TV series, or even like Ben Affleck's Daredevil movie, he was a young kid. He looked up to his father, who was like a boxer, and it turns out that his father worked for Wilson Fisk, who was still rising up to the ranks of Kingpin, and he caught his father mugging people for the Kingpin, and out of shame runs, some, truck with toxic waste, stops abruptly. The stuff comes flying out. The radioactive waste hits his eyes, turns him blind, but gives him enhanced senses, which he ends up using to his advantage thanks to Stick, who he meets up, sometime later. And of course, we all know it. He utilizes those skills to become Daredevil. All the while that Kingpin, after finding out that battling Jack Murdock was going to turn him in to the police, caught him. Obviously hinted that he killed him, and because Matt Murdock knows the king, Wilson Fisk is the Kingpin, but he doesn't have the sufficient. Sorry about that. Doesn't have the sufficient evidence to put him behind bars permanently. And you also get the story of Wilson Fisk telling Smythe about his origin story. And of course, he was like a fat little kid that people look down upon, make fun of. His father was a criminal, and he wants his father's approval, so he went into crime with his father. But in order to not go in jail, his son had to take the fall, and he spent most of his young adult life in prison. So when he got out, he started rose through the ranks and became the kingpin of crime. And then he took his revenge off his father after he erased any record of young Willie Wilson of any kind of like records, of who he is. He wanted like a clean slate so nobody can tie him to his actual past. Not unlike the TV show. So he took out his own father so that way he won't be looked at for so snitch on him or anything like that. And Smythe was like, man, I knew you were ruthless, but that, and it's like, you can't help but compare this to the TV show, how ruthless the Kingpin can really be, because he even secluded, he didn't kill his own mother in the show, but he secluded the hell out of her to the point where it's like, nobody knows who she really is. He kept it a very tight secret. But and especially when the fact that she gotten like senile, so of course he couldn't have her blast, so he didn't kill her, but he kept her very secluded, where he every so often visits. Not every so often, but he visits whenever he can get the privacy. So thanks to Daredevil and Detective Lee, they cleared Parker's name, but Kingpin got away. But Chameleon kind of took the FBI agent who was working for Fisk, as well as Fisk's own son, is brought up on is being prosecuted. And of course, they couldn't flip on Fisk, and Fisk, who echoed his own father's voice to his own kid, he said sacrifices must be made. But unlike his father, Wilson actually it pains him to do this. You can tell it pains him to do this, but he needs his anonymity. So he has his own son take the rap completely, along with the other two, and he's in his own home looking at his picture of him, Vanessa, and his son, and he talks to himself like, okay, now how long would it be before my son would exact his revenge on me? So it's that perpetual cycle. So I like this theme of father son. This is probably like the best theme in the entire series. But then you got like Smythe, who decides to like, because he had enough with Fist and dealing with him, because it's just gonna go pear shaped up, and none of it is worth it. And so he tries to rat him out, but he ends up getting caught. And then, thanks to Wilson and Landon, who makes a return here, or just like, discount Two-Face, he turned Smythe into some, cyborg, another, I guess, ultimate Spider Slayer, who comes after, like, Spider-Man, like the Terminator. But with bits of like RoboCop-ish, because he's not allowed to hurt his own creators. But he ends up ultimately overriding that by the end of the episode. But thanks to Madam Web, who, pretty much, very vaguely informs Spider-Man that, I guess lead with love, some kind of thing like that, where Spider-Man spies on Kingpin and Landon and discovers that Alistair Smythe's father isn't dead, but kept in cold storage to keep Smythe in his employ, because thanks to his brains and robotics, he can use that to his advantage. But this brings Smythe out of that, his robotic programming, and Spider-Man tells him, like, go 5 floors down, you'll find your father. And, Smythe's just like, I will remember that. And he saves his father, but this is probably the last time we ever see Smythe. I could be wrong, but the last moment we see him is like talking to his father, who's still like in cryo sleep, who says like, we will exact our revenge on all who had harmed his father. So it's like Smythe really loves his father, and his father loves his son, and he's willing to like even work with somebody like Kingpin and Norman Osborn in order to get, because Smythe's been like stuck in a wheelchair for most of his adult life. So he had, he worked to try to get his son into this, fancy hover chair, not unlike something like Professor X. But Smythe now is like, okay, we're going after Fisk for what he's done to us. So that's the last we see of that. Then we get like a one episode where I always takes this as, I'm not gonna say like gospel, I'm pretty sure it's in the comics, but the not introduction, but the origin of Tombstone, which is loosely based on like a Spectacular Spider-Man number 139 and 142, where he has Tombstone has his origin story is tied with Robbie Robinson, who they knew each other as kids, and Tombstone wanted to break in to this store to steal like ice cream and other crap, but of course Robbie, who was a good kid, but obviously got tangled up with this kid who obviously is a rotten kid, and of course it's like black children, and it's like probably grew up in a rough neighborhood, especially given their age, especially Robbie's age. You can tell that he was probably grew up children of possibly like the late 60s, so it's probably like harsh. for young black kids. Uh, Robbie ended up running away, leaving uh, Tombstone behind to take the rap. And of course, the, I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure when the whole legal age to try kids as an adults exactly happened. But they bring this little kid in who not even 13, possibly approaching 13, who knows, but very young, is not of legal age to be tried as an adult. Who knows? He probably went to juvie, which shouldn't have, been there. He shouldn't probably been in there for that long. But he comes out as, late teens, early 20s. And of course, he didn't rat out his friend, but all the while, Robbie got his degree. He went to journalism, and of course, he got this hot tip about something happening at this chemical plant, and he goes. Robbie trying to stop him. Is kind of reminiscent to Red Hood and Batman, and the Joker ends up, before he became the Joker, Jack Napier falls into the chemicals and comes out as a Joker. Here, he comes out as, this guy comes out as Tombstone. Of course, Robbie thought he died. And of course, he didn't run away or hide anything. He stood there, wait till the cops come and explain the story. And thankfully, he told people at the newspaper what was going on, so they vouched for him. And ironically, and of course, Spider-Man had to make some kind of subtle joke about the whole Joker thing when he tried to stop Tombstone at the end of the episode, and he makes a comment, "Wow, another dip in this, your hair might turn green." Ha ha ha. Of course, Tombstone running this bandana gang, who also he works for Alicia Silverman. I think her name is Alicia Silverman. Alicia Silverman, who now is taking over her father's criminal enterprises, which still stuns Spider-Man. Is like, wow, I almost went on a date with this chick. And Robbie sounded like, I'm glad you didn't, because this kid's bad news. Because he's all in on this criminal empire. Because he's talking about sins of the father. She's taking up her father's mantle. And then you got Robbie, who Pete doesn't realize got his own struggles with his son, who's this kid who felt like his father's not around as much and needs attention. So he looks towards his bandana gang, who was they're my real family. They care about me. And thanks to Spider-Man pointing out to him these kids was ready to leave him behind to take the rap and rekindle the relationship Robbie has with his own kid. That's all nice. It's a nice little. It's probably the best Robbie Robinson story I can remember, because I don't remember much in any comic. They tried to do something early last year with Spider-Man, because every so often they keep bringing up about Robbie having a kid, and for a time him and Peter were roommates and stuff like that in the comics, and Robbie's hooking up with one of Spider-Man's nemesis' kids, this girl who's the new Beetle, because the Beetle in the current comics right now is a female who's in a relationship with Robbie, who also happens to be the daughter of Tombstone. So I'm glad they kind of I think thanks to this episode, and I think maybe it was in the comments that I'm referencing here, but it kind of cemented, thanks to this episode, that Robbie and Tombstone's share a history, and so their kids kind of end up sharing a history. And ironically, this whole Romeo and Juliet thing they got going on in the comics is they are in love, and it kind of forced the fathers to not bury the hatchet, but kind of broker force peace. It's like, it's like you do your thing, I'll do my thing, but it's like, our kids love each other, so we're not whatever. But it's not all bygones be bygones, that kind of thing either. So anyway, there's a nice little Robbie Robinson episode. Then we got the return of Venom, as well as the introduction of Carnage, which, made this episode really cemented about like how badass Carnage is as a villain. You got Cletus Cassidy, and I can't help but think about Woody Harrelson. Thanks, that face kind of reminds me of Woody Harrelson, a young Woody Harrelson, because he's pretty much like a psychopath. And it was Dormammu, because I forgot how Venom returned back to Earth, but thanks to Dormammu using his mystical means, moved the probe that had the symbiote attached to it back to Earth and attached to this couple. Lo and behold, the symbiote was reproduces asexually, so it was technically pregnant at the time, and the symbiote, thanks to Baron Mordo, leaned it to back to Eddie Brock, who, thanks to Dr. Kafka in Ravencroft Institute, pretty much like Marvel's version of Arkham Asylum, is trying to get help, and he ends up falling in love with, falling for Dr. Kafka, who you don't see much of in the comics. It's like she pops up here and there. I think you show up a little bit in like a Carnage comic a couple of years back, where it's some kind of cult worshipping Carnage, who later on you find out tied to the whole King in Black comic storyline. But anyway, thanks to Baron Mordo, he reacquaintance Venom to Eddie Brock, but he also has to promise to get this machine at the Stark Expo to use to break, because it forces like a dimensional portal kind of situation, and it ties in another episode with the Spot, which we'll get into in that one. But this interdimensional thing he wanted to use to use science, since he couldn't use the mystical means traditionally. He used the science to force open a bridge between the Dark Dimension and Earth, but he needs the souls to a good amount of souls to transfer into the Dark Dimension as like a substitute, because somebody has to be there with equal amount of like residual energy compared to Dormammu, in order to it's kind of like with like Indiana Jones, where he has to replace one item with another to avoid a trap. It's kind of like that. So you get like ties, because it's a nice little crossover. It's just like with the X-Men, Iron Man, the anime series gets some cameos here with like the voice actor, and also Uncle Phil, who also the guy who I'm blanking on his name, who was Uncle Phil in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He did a fair bit of voice acting. He was Shredder in the 80s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoons, and he was also James Rhodes' War Machine in the Iron Man 90s series. And War Machine tried to stop Venom from taking the machine, but then somehow, and this is kind of, I was finding it weird that with all this going on with Venom and War Machine, Spider-Man and War Machine trying to stop Venom from taking this machine, Dormammu astral projects to get the Carnage symbiote to Cletus Cassidy, and somehow he shows up, as well as Kafka, shows up in time at the Stark Expo to deal with the mess going on there. It's like, okay, how long this fight been going on? Because it's like y'all show up in minutes, and it's like unless it's down the street, y'all shouldn't be showing up that freaking fast. But whatever. Because I thought that was kind of weird. Like y'all got her pretty fast. And people was talking about like Game of Thrones and people just showing up like they got jetpacks on. But Carnage, now in the employ of Dormammu and Baron Mordo, him and Venom goes to bring the machine to Baron Mordo. But Venom's like, okay, I held my hand of the bargain. I'm taking a hike. And so they figure, okay, we'll just, keep Carnage. That's enough. So they use Carnage to suck the souls in his body, or at least enough that he can store in his own body, to transfer it into this jar and fill it up, this massive jar. And so he sucks the soul from Kafka and Lee and tried to do it for Spider-Man, but it didn't work because he was like already filled up. And so Madam Web tells Spider-Man that, keep your friends close but your enemies closer. So he comes to, despite the efforts of Kafka and Dr. Connors, managed to separate the symbiote from Eddie Brock. He knows that, okay, Kafka is in danger. I gotta help, even if I have to work with Spider-Man, the person I hate. But despite the warnings from Connor that if you attach yourself with the Venom symbiote, we can't separate you again without end up ultimately killing you. And so he takes that chance. So Iron Man, Venom, and Spider-Man work together to go stop Carnage, Baron Mordo, and Dormammu from releasing Dormammu into the real world yet again. And so the fight ensues, and they send Dormammu back through the dark dimension. And since Carnage, thanks to the mystical means to suck those souls for Dormammu, they can't close the portal without sending Carnage through too. And they do, but Carnage ensnares Kafka to try to pull her through with him. But with Venom jumping in to stop that, he ends up going through, and his final words to Kafka was like, "I always love you." And this stuns Spider-Man. It's like, what? No, he's one of my deadliest enemies, but in the end, he turns out to be a good hero. And of course, Venom will obviously make a return. And then, of course, you got the Spot, who will be the main bad guy in part 1 of Across the Spider-Verse in June. And the Spot, who the real name Jonathan Owen, who has the, thanks to, because he's the one who helped create the machine for Tony Stark in order to create those like portals and interdimensional kind of stuff. Of course, after the events of what went on with like Venom and Carnage, it's like, okay, this is way too dangerous. I'm scrapping the whole project. We'll find you another project to work on. And of course, Dr. Ohm doesn't believe he subscribed this. He doesn't want to. He want to work on like world-changing inventions and stuff like that. Nothing so like fancy new toilet paper dispensers or whatever he had to refer to it. Kind of like blasé type of inventions. And so he gets recruited by the Kingpin, and he meets up with this woman. what's her name? Dr. Sylvia Lopez, and uh, he manages because he needs the funding, and he doesn't believe he doesn't like the whole uh, the money bag financiers encroaching on, because he loves science, and it's like, this whole you know business benefactors funding the whole thing. He feels like they worry too much about the money aspect and not the science in of itself. But he needs the funding, and he ends up making it work. But in the ensuing process, a few portals fly out, randomly in certain areas of New York, and it ends up mutating him into the spot to control these portals. And he ends up gathering them all up before they cause any kind of damage to the city. Because, well, this episode kind of put him like, okay, he's not like a bad dude. One second. He's not like a bad dude. He's a scientist, but he ends up, keeping the discovery a secret from Kingpin. But he needs like the funding to like get out of the clutches of the Kingpin, so he can just help fuel the research. But he ends up crossing paths with Spider-Man, and because he forgot one portal is in the sky and it's growing bigger, and it's gotten too big for him to close on his own on the outside. So thanks to using Kingpin's one of his planes, he helped the Spot form a miniature machine harness to help close the portal. But it got to a point where it's like running out of sufficient power to close it on the outside, so he has to be on the inside to close it. So Sylvia jumps in with him because she doesn't want to be without him, and ends up closing the portal to save New York. And just like with Kafka and Eddie Brock, these two relationships, like, it was very quick. I was like, y'all know each other. I mean, of course, they mentioned about like they've been working on this for like weeks and stuff like that. So I guess they kind of explained the way that they fell in love with each other, I guess. And I guess the same thing could be said with Brock and Kafka, but it's, I don't know. It seems on a surface like very fast. This whole quick, like, so in love with you that you like. Let's say it's been weeks. It's still not long enough for you want to. I guess you could say it's the honeymoon period phase in your mind. It's like, I so in love with you, but it's like, I don't know you well enough yet. Let's say given like nearly a month, I'm not jumping in a portal with you to my possible doom because I couldn't live without you. If y'all been together for like a couple of years, I can possibly see that happening. But I don't know. It seems so fast with these kind of like relationships with these side characters. But then the season ends with Hobgoblin going up against the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin makes the return because the Goblin persona is part of Norman Osborn's mind. Complete DID, formerly known as split personality, and the Hobgoblin, voiced by Mark Hamill, is like stunned the fact that because he never tangled with Green Goblin before. He thought he was a rumor, but it's like, it's only one true Goblin, the Green Goblin, and they just like lobbing pumpkin bombs at each other. And of course, the goblins, doing all this stuff for weak Norman and everything like that. And it, you know, we learn about like because how Goblin is was Jason Masondale. I think his name is Jason. Yeah, Jason Masondale, who was engaged to Felicia Hardy, and come to her shock and his shock that 1 second. Come to her shock and his shock that he was the Hobgoblin, and she asked him, "Did you ever really love me, Jason?" And he says like, "I love things about you, and like your wealth and the way you carry yourself and stuff like that." It's like, no, you love her superficial stuff. So he gets hauled away to prison, but then Green Goblin, using like the one of the spare but proto broken interdimensional portal thingies, ends up finding out Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and coincide with, it's kind of like these last two episodes kind of like reminiscent to the Gwen Stacy story where Goblin takes her on the bridge and throws her off, and of course it ends up causing the death of Gwen Stacy when Spider-Man tried to catch her. But here you got Mary Jane, and of course she didn't end up dying, but fall through one of those portal thingies and is in the water. So of course Spider-Man doesn't know that, and he assumed that she just died and got carried away by current. But Spider-Man fighting ferociously against the Green Goblin, but ultimately he can't like do like the deed because this is still Harry's father. Harry's still his friend, despite Harry just becoming like the begrudged, jilted lover, even though he was kind of like just a daddy's boy, and just using like Mary Jane as pretty much arm cannon to like boost his own ego and favor in his father's eyes, because he only cares about his father's like approval to like a dangerous degree. And so like the Green Goblin kind of like reminiscent to the first movie, I think, which Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man kind of harkened to this episode where the Green Goblin's trying to summon his glider to attack Spider-Man, but Spider-Man jumps over that and it ends up hitting Goblin right through the portal, and that's that. And of course Spider-Man goes to Madam Web and asks like, you gotta save her, help me find like Mary Jane, and Madam Web, like the Watcher, she can't like interfere too much. And of course Spider-Man, rightfully so, he's obviously lost someone he really, really loves, and with all her power, she ain't lifting a effing finger, especially she's been jerking her around all through these weeks. It's like, okay, don't freaking call me no more. Don't make a presence. No, none of that stuff. I don't want to see you ever again. And of course, she feels bad about it, but she still's like preparing him for this ultimate battle that still's going to come regardless. And we'll find out later what that is. And that's the last of Sins of the Father. So great season. I love this season. The whole thematic thing, which we don't do enough of like that with most series, but I love like the whole chapter not only got like sometimes separate episodes, 2 or 3 might be coinciding with each other, but they all fall on the same banner because there's so much. Aside from like maybe like Rocket Racer, and The Spot, you got like things playing with different people dealing with some aspect of a parental figure, or at least normally like a father, and their children in one shape or form, and it's really, really well done. I think like the whole Daredevil and I think like the team up episodes were like my favorite, with like Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and Daredevil. those are my favorite. Those are a whole lot of fun. But let me know in the comments below what you thought of this season. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and share this with your friends. Follow me in the links in the description. And I will see you guys in a little bit for a comic book review, another Spider-Man comic book review. There's only one. And I'll do another one possibly in a couple of days. If not, tomorrow, the next day. And I'll finish the last 2 seasons of this series next week. Hopefully I can get it all done next week. And then I can move forward into the MTV Spider-Man series. They only had the 1 season, and I'll get into that. And then after that, it will be Spectacular Spider-Man. And hopefully around that time, I'll be wrapping up the comic book reviews for Spider-Man stuff, leading into the Spider-Verse stories.